Hello and welcome to the Six Sales podcast. My name's Mike Nicholson from Six Sales. Today I'm going to be speaking to Fern Potter from Multilocal. Before we dive into that, just want to say a big thank you to the team at Lumen Research for sponsoring the podcast. For those that don't know, Lumen Research are an eye tracking technology company which are helping brands to understand how attention, what attention looks like online, and helping them to plan, buy, measure and optimize towards real human attention. So thanks to the team there. And as we're mentioning Lumen Research, I have some data hot off the press, Fern. Firstly, welcome. Thanks for coming on the podcast. Lovely to see you.
Thank you for having me. Yeah.
What's your favourite Christmas ad? We are recording this a few days before December 2025, so I think it's okay to use the C word.
I mean, it's still quite early if you ask me, but it's a tricky one. There's some really good ones out there, but I am quite a big fan of the Aldi one with that little carrot guy.
Yes, okay. So I have some data here hot off the press. So Lumen Research and a company called T-Vision have a panel in the UK where they have hundreds of households with front-facing cameras on the TV, which enables them to measure attention to advertising. So we have all of the retailer Christmas adverts here, and the Aldi ad, or Aldi ad, depending on how you say it. The 40-second version had a 62% attention rate, which basically means that 62% of the ad on average was looked at directly, which is quite high. The highest, in fact, was TK Maxx, which had a Roald Dahl theme, I think, if I remember it rightly, and that was 69.5% of the ad viewed on average. So there we go. Yeah, some live data there. Who said that podcasts have to be reactive, eh? So very, very, very glad to be speaking to you again.
Thank you.
How you been?
Really well. It's been quite a year. Curation is one of the probably hottest topics that you'll see a lot of people talking about, which is fantastic for us as a business. Obviously, we want to lead on those conversations in the industry. And so, yeah, it's been brilliant. Really enjoying it.
Cool, good. So can you give us a little bit of a flavour on what Multilocal do?
Yeah, of course. So we are an independent curation expert business, essentially. And we operate in probably the easiest way to explain it is in two ways. One, we help people find audiences across the open web, package them into deals so they can be assured of the media quality that they're buying in a completely transparent environment. But also we make sure that those deals are performant, that they also have troubleshooting because deals never work out of the box. They've always been a bit of a pain when it comes to programmatic. And to find and scale audiences for advertisers. The other part of our business, the partnership side, is what we call curation as a service. So what we've built over the last 5 years, actually 5 years today. We're 5 years old today.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. Yeah, I just realised that's fantastic. So over the last 5 years, we've built a lot of proprietary technology into our business that sits across all of the different curate platforms that exist in each of the SSPs, and working with data providers and publishers to be able to package up the tools as well as the services, because we're a services business at the end of the day, to deliver that straight into businesses that want to get into curation but perhaps don't know where to start, also perhaps don't have the resource and the investment to build that into their own current kind of workflow and team. So we kind of have this curation as a service. It's curation in a box. You tap into, we're now 60 people globally, and all of their expertise, but as I said, as well as that proprietary tech. So that's been a really successful model that we've explored over the last couple of years. And it's enabling us to help kind of keep up with the industry trend and really drive curation expertise into the different businesses. Okay,
very good. So you are SVP of Strategy and Partnerships. So what does a day in the life of Fern Potter look like then? From the moment you open your eyes in the morning to closing them again at night, what happens in between?
Yeah, a lot. I mean, you know me, I do love a chat. So there's a lot of conversations and meetings that are happening on a regular basis with partners globally, helping people, kind of guiding them through the principles of what curation is, how it could benefit their business. I think curation is quite an ambiguous term, which is fine. But also, so you've got to kind of cut through with people what that actually means for their business, which I quite like. It can be really bespoke. So working with clients, also working with our partners. As I said, we're integrated with 14 of the SSP platforms. So understanding exactly what the intelligence is that they are building, aligning on the product part of our business so that we can make sure, you know, our tools are up to date, but also are giving the best of the best. It's funny, you talked about attention earlier. You know, we get asked quite frequently, can you just build me a high attention PMP automotive females over 35? Like, great. That's how we can start understanding what's in each one of those SSPs to get the best kind of recommendation for the open web. So a lot of talking about curation, which I love, very passionate about it. Walking my dog. I mean, that's the first thing I do. Okay. Very good for your mental health as well, getting out in the countryside, walking, fresh air, especially when we're so hectic in this industry.
I did that through lockdown. Coffee, yeah. Coffee's where I start and continue until about lunchtime. But I used to love it in lockdown where you get a bit of exercise. Everyone was locked down, but you could have a bit of exercise. And I'd go walking first thing, and it was really good. But for some reason, I fell out of the habit, and it's so frustrating that I can't get back into the habit because I wake up and I think, right, I'm busy. Crack on. And it's, what's that saying? If I had 8 hours to chop down a tree, I'd spend the first 4 hours sharpening the axe. I think that walk can be a bit sharpening the axe. Yeah. But for some reason, I just can't seem to get back into the habit. So good work. Keep it up.
It is. It's interesting, isn't it? Because we were kind of conditioned, weren't we? We had that hourly schedule where you could go out. And I think you're quite right. If you've got to kind of make it into a habit. But I do find, you know, just even being able to collect your thoughts, you know, build things in your mind or switch off completely. Yeah. It's a good thing to do. For sure. So curation as a word then, or curation as a service, how are we going to define this? Because we'll get into what people are saying about curation and sort of trying to figure out what that looks like. But how would you describe, in its simplest terms, how would you define what curation is? Yeah, it's a good question. There's a lot of definitions. So for us, it's about the packaging of high-performance audiences from the open web into deals, making them work for both the publisher and the advertiser. Now, what we're seeing is, you know, by using the mechanism of curation as we've defaulted to the open marketplace, by using the mechanic that is curation, you're bridging audiences across both the buy and the sell side. And that's delivering incrementality to publishers or anyone with a media asset that they own. But it's also helping, bypass that perhaps performance asymmetry that's always existed on the buy side to be able to bridge together those audiences and make them work for advertisers. So you're it's adding value to the entire ecosystem. So I think in a short, snappy, which I was not, a short, snappy sentence, it would be about, you know, being able to package audiences to make sure that they're meaningful and high performant for advertisers, but also that curation's enabling publishers to monetize all of their assets.
And if I've understood correctly, this is happening on the sell side, right? So this is more aligned to the supply than the demand, whereas a DSP is obviously very much the buy side, and then it looks at the whole market and tries to figure out what it should buy based on that. Whereas if I've understood curation correctly, you're much more aligned to the sell side, and you're looking for the right media placements, the right data signals, the right audience targeting, and then putting that together in almost like a mini open marketplace, which is super curated, funnily enough, to the needs of particular advertisers.
Yeah, absolutely. Spot on. I think you're on the supply side, they're sitting on so much, you know, data and so many signals that actually if you package that and feed it through to the DSP, I kind of say, you know, you've got a 1 + 1 is 3 because you've got better performance. As a buyer, you've still got control in the DSP. You're still controlling that bidding logic, but you're being packaged through the really high relevant audiences, titles, contextual environments, IDs, no IDs, as well as the audience overlay within that, so that you can. So the DSP is kind of essentially the bidding logic is on really relevant audience packages to start with, as opposed to across the open web where you've got a bit more of it's a bit more of a spray and pray probably approach.
Yeah. There's got to be a sustainability angle to this as well, I would imagine, right? Because there's less ad requests going into a DSP. If there's obviously if the total addressable market is smaller, then there's less ad requests, which means that that's got to be sort of cutting down the carbon, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think as a kind of natural byproduct to your point, you're reducing the amount of listening that has to happen because you're carving that up on the supply side. So by its nature, curation is ensuring that there's less carbon wastage within programmatic.
And is it also the case that the SSP or the supply side tends to have a much deeper understanding of the bid stream, whereas only a partial amount of that is passed to a DSP typically. So you have perhaps better listening, for want of a better term, to the supply at a curation level than a DSP would, where they might only get 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 parameters passed, perhaps.
Yeah, there is. I mean, it definitely varies per SSP and DSP. But what we tend to find is as you said, there's a lot more kind of complete signal data on the supply side that we can then curate and manipulate into the DSP that perhaps would not have been listened to because of QPS throttling, and algorithmic bidding as well. So I think what curation, I feel, helps to do is actually bypass the kind of disintermediation that tech is building in audience matching and go back to probably how we wanted programmatic to be, which was PMPs, PG, and now you've got this curation and move us out the open marketplace. So to your point, you can actually take advantage as a buyer of that complete signals of what's in the bid stream and really understand exactly where your ads are being served, how they're being monetized, who you're working with. It gives that layer of transparency that I think we just have got used to not having, but it does exist.
You're obviously far too young to remember this, but I started in digital before programmatic was a thing, and everything was done manually. So the media agency, I was at the Telegraph at the time, and the media agency would come to the Telegraph and say, I want this many impressions with this amount of targeting, and we would serve it, and then we would send them an Excel spreadsheet saying we served it, and that was the end of it. It's a very different world now, but it feels to me that we used to be very narrow, probably because of the amount of heavy lifting that was done. So the media agency would maybe go to half a dozen publishers to get a campaign away. And then programmatic started and real-time bidding and the open web. And then suddenly thousands of publishers might be considered for any particular campaign. And it feels like we're coming back again with firstly PMPs being all the rage, and now curation, which is seeking to make sense of what's out there, but maybe sort of a much tighter group of what's out there rather than everything.
Yeah, I think you're quite right. There's going back a bit, about 5-6 years ago, I was working in an agency before kind of we had the curation platforms, where working with brands to ensure that we had the principles of how they wanted to buy media, like what that quality index needed to be. And here this was our strategy of media buying. And I think brands are a lot, now that we've got these curation tools, there's a really great way of being able to implement media quality into a deal with your audience so that you can really stand by the ethics that you have as a brand, and reduce media wastage. But, a lot of conversations, cookie deprecation or not, who knows? But, the consent first internet, as users start getting more and more knowledgeable about how their data is used online, brand safety, brand suitability, all these factors of kind of, I think, and all these points of conversation have kind of led up to actually curation being a bit of a solution for that. To your point, you can just really carve out what you want to buy, then use the DSP to deliver that bidding logic across multiple campaigns. But yeah, I do remember pre-programmatic, it did feel a lot simpler.
Yeah. But
this is hopefully what we're trying to do with curation. It's I described it the other day as you know about elephant paths in the Dutch culture.
No.
And it's essentially where design fails user behavior. So these elephant paths are just carved out paths that people have used if perhaps, the steps are going in the wrong direction. And that was kind of my analogy for curation, where I think we've had a bit of a design fail on programmatic and everyone's opted in. And there's no real value in the open marketplace. It's more kind of commoditized price. Whereas like the elephant path as such, I think it'd be better with a visual I'll post it up, is curation, where users are finding a way and people are finding a way using the technology to match audiences better in a safe way, a transparent way, and a disclosed way. So I think that's where it's come in. Curation is just helping solve for some of these challenges that kind of programmatic has created for itself. Because it's fantastic, right? It's awesome that you can get all that scale. I can find an audience. I think about my own behaviour, huge F1 fan. I'll go on the BBC, I'll go on Sky, but I'll also go on Crash.net and W2F1 and Planet Sport. And, if you're, to your point, as a buyer, you can only manage, 5 or 6 direct deals, then you're missing out. Publishers are missing out on the monetization of their audiences, but also buyers are missing out on really like high target environments.
Yeah.
So that's what I think it helps solve for, deliver the scale, but in a really meaningful way that is adhered to with, quality principles in place, but also incrementality for pubs that the open marketplace doesn't deliver.
So you mentioned a couple of publishers there. Other publishers are available.
Yes.
What is the value of curation to publishers? So if you're looking at it, I spent most of my life either working at a publisher or for publishers at adtech before 6Ls. So I'm specifically interested always in the publisher view. So why should a publisher be excited about curation?
Yeah, I think, it's such a good question. And I will not, I'm from the buy side. My career has been 20 years on the buy side. So I think I've been listening a lot recently to how publishers are feeling about curation, because, there's always, with new technologies and new demand sources and opting in and opting out of what these processes are, there's always a bit of kind of fear about who has control. So when I've been having conversations with publishers of late around curation, I think it's all what we've worked through and what we've talked about is how we could demonstrate through curation incrementality. And who it serves. Is it a publisher with a big sales team or no sales team? There's not kind of a one size fits all, I think. But if we can put a proper hypotheses together with a testing plan and implement to a success metric of going, right, if this drives you more value through a deal than the open marketplace deal, we can run them side by side. We can run them, can't think of the word. Side by side, continuously or something. That's
yeah.
Blank. But to prove out the business case for incrementality that they then control, because I think what is nice about curation is if when you're working with deals, you're controlling the performance of those deals, how they scaled, what your yield is, what your CPMs are, etc. When you're in the open marketplace, that's all decided by the DSP and the bidding logic of the buyer. And you don't necessarily get that pass back as a publisher of, am I hitting a CPA target? How do I stay on plan? How do I get a greater share of wallet of the buy? So, yeah, I think a few things for publishers. One, about the control. I think curation can help with that, but I think it needs to be means tested. Maybe just opting in is where, there's been a bit of kind of backlash about whether curation is just another ad tech tax or not, because actually you need to prove out whether it's valuable to your own business.
Okay. Cool. And from the buy side, why would brands and media agencies be excited by curation?
Why? I mean, I love it. Why I got into the business from being on the buy side was I saw definitely the opportunity for me to be able to package an entire audience for every single product line and across a global business and be able to have that consistency of targeting in a really complete way. So you've got all of the data, you've got all of the audiences, the titles, the different signals in a single strategy that I can then have as an optimized deal that I then optimize the bidding logic on the buy side. So it felt to me like it was such a meaningful way of being able to kind of consolidate your programmatic buying operationally, find audiences really specifically to a high quality media index, and also drive performance out of programmatic. I think we've been a bit kind of, again, display, is it reach, is it frequency? And a lot of branding budgets are moving to accountability now. So how do we stop wastage? And curation with that measurement part and being sat on the signal side of the supply side is giving greater performance from a deal perspective. So we run a lot of CPA campaigns on display and video, which is quite unusual for its purpose. The other day we ran a campaign and we reduced the CPA by 75%. We see click-through rates increasing anywhere between 30 and 40%. So there's good outcomes and control.
Excellent. Okay. So how do, but I suppose there's two questions in one. How would a brand get started with curation and how would a publisher get started with curation?
Good question. I love this question as well, actually. Thank you, because I think we talk a lot about the why, the what is it, who's going to do it, and actually the cut through is the how. So when we start, just being completely transparent, we start talking to publishers, we'll look and see, have they got a deals business already? Is it something that they want to scale? How is it performing? We can work with you on being able to build that expertise into your deals business and get better results. And, go through that use case as I talked through about incrementality for them and also for their advertisers. Now, that's how we work as a business. I think some publishers, when you're looking at by an SSP, on an SSP basis, you can opt your inventory in. But I think that's a decision to make. It probably goes through the same kind of testing protocol, but we look at it as kind of like strategically, how do you monetize your asset as a publisher? What's that testing plan? What have you got in place, as I said already, that we can help work with? From an advertiser perspective, it's around what they're trying to achieve with programmatic, looking at curation for an audience strategy. Again, have they got a deals business? Do they want to? We work with some advertisers that want to move completely out of the open marketplace. They're only going to work with deals programmatically. So understanding what that business use case is it they just need some, for us as a service business, do they just need some help with the expertise in managing deals, or is it specifically an advertiser use case to finding different audiences and making sure the deals are performing?
Okay. And for those that say that it's just like an ad network, essentially, it's just an ad network with a different name, how is it similar to an ad network and how is it not similar to an ad network, would you say?
Yeah, I don't get it. Maybe. Or maybe that's my naivety. I mean, I guess the similarities is you're packaging audiences. Like you had vertical ad networks and you're doing it through programmatic pipes, but curation is deals. It's not the open marketplace. It's completely transparent. So you know exactly what you're buying. That's fully reported. People, there is a tax that's disclosed. So I think that's the differences. I feel like ad network was very much like open marketplace, not sure what you're buying, hope for the best. Perhaps not as accountable. And then, curation is more of a solve for programmatic as opposed to probably the ad network model.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes, I think so. Yeah. Thank you. And in terms of red flags, like when you start with anything new, there's usually bumps in the road. What should people be looking out for in the early days of getting into curation? Are there things that you should look for? Are there any red flags that they should be? Sorry, I'm just if I'm sounding slightly distracted, a gentleman just came to the door with a printout that I asked for, and he was waving at me through the glass. So sorry for that. Come on, Michael, get your act together. What was I saying? Oh yeah, are there any red flags or bumps in the road that people should look out for that they might encounter in early days of getting involved with curation? Yeah,
absolutely. As I said, I think you've got to prove out the business case. Is it resource? Is it finding audiences? Is it incrementality? I mean, like going into everything with your eyes open of going, does this work for me? Because it won't work for everyone. Red flags, there's a lot of curators around. I think like really analysing what they've got under the hood, understanding how the businesses are built, how they're transacting, how you've been remunerated. Being mindful of how each, there's quite a lot of different flavours of curation as well. Just being mindful about how each company operates. And then does it suit your business need as well? I think it'll grow. I think it'll grow substantially. I think we're definitely seeing a lot more competition even in the last 6 months. I'm sure more players will come in. So you kind of have to do a bit of a kind of RFI. Or just talk to us, really, actually.
That's the main thing, isn't it? Yeah, just talk to us.
I mean, just talk to Multilocal.
I'm sensing that.
We love a chat.
I'm sensing that's the way forward in your world, yeah. And finally then, since it's coming up to Christmas nearly, this is the sort of time of year where execs like your good self are asked to get the crystal ball out and have a look forward and tell us all what's going to happen in 2025. So what's going to happen in 2025, Fern?
Gosh, well, it'll be a big year, isn't it?
365 days, I heard.
Oh, massive.
That's a lot of days.
That's a lot of days. And a lot's going to change in the geopolitical climate, but you probably don't mean that. You probably want me to stick to maybe adtech. I mean, many things could happen. But yeah, I think what excites me is obviously, I think next year is going to be hot for curation as it is now, but I think like there's a maturity level and there's a lot more people leaning into to wanting to understand how it can help their business, which is great. More formats coming into programmatic. We've seen the rise of CTV. That will continue to shift forwards. We're having lots of conversations around audio and digital at home as well. So I think that's a really exciting space. What is quite good as well is these like new formats entering programmatic are learning from the display and video kind of maybe open marketplace woes. So the technology is different, which is great. And what I'm particularly kind of interested in is how curation will start working with the MarTech as well as the adtech. So we're seeing a huge rise in retail media. I think when you can bring first-party data CRM into that programmatic environment, it's really valuable. But how do you do that without having a substantial amount of walled gardens in place? So helping kind of navigate where curation fits across both, I think will be quite exciting next year.
Talking of walled gardens, I noticed Google have got involved in curation fairly early on. Yeah,
We're on the beta.
Yeah, right.
Very cool.
Is there a danger that will end up being another walled garden, do you think?
I'm not sure. I mean, who knows what's going to happen with Google? I mean, we've seen the latest DOJ piece where they can get rid of Chrome. It's another Google entering into it. It just kind of raises the stakes in terms of curation being something that people need to understand if it works for them. Yeah. So I think that's always good. These, they're a big brand, love them or hate them. They control a lot of the programmatic market. So I think it felt like a good business decision for them. And so we're completely independent. Everything we do is performance driven. So we use the platforms that we're integrated in and the tech that we're integrated into on a performance outcome basis. So we'll see how it goes, basically.
Wonderful. Nice way to end. Fern, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Much appreciated.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Pleasure.